Exit algorithms. Scale smarter. Sell stronger.
Welcome to Exit Algorithms, the podcast where we decode what it really takes to unlock growth, streamline operations, and prepare your business for a high-value exit. I'm your host, Pete Vera, and today I'm excited to bring on Ted Fyock as my guest. He's a combat veteran turned Deloitte consultant, turned founder and CEO of the tech-enabled freight brokerage, Carolina Expressways. Ted, so excited to have you, man. Welcome to the show.
Yeah, no, I really appreciate you having me on. I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you mind starting off? You can share your background and your career journey and what led you to Carolina Expressways.
I think to start, it was a very circuitous, way to get to brokering freight. But right out of college, I commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Army as a armor officer. So for folks that don't know, that's tanks and mechanized reconnaissance. That's specifically what I did. And while I was in the military, just because tanks are a rather resource intensive piece of equipment and just takes a lot to furnish them, kind of dual hatted as a logistics officer. So both stateside and then overseas, had a lot of experience with moving large loads, freight, and which got to a decision point. My wife and I had been kind of geographically separated while I was training in the field all the time and then deployed. We finally met back up in the Washington, D.C. area and decided to get out and went directly to Deloitte Consulting, where I had a 12-year career before I left recently to start Carolina Expressways. But my time at Deloitte was, I would say, a very educational experience, one coming directly from the military. I think that a lot of veterans deal with some acclimation to society, if you will, and really, what do they? I call Deloitte like my first real job, and those experiences I'll take with me for the rest of my life, and I think really position me well for starting a logistics business. In particular, we're brokering freight commercially, and in the process of standing up our federal contracting business.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. Were there any skills you learned during the military that have kind of carried forward throughout your career so far?
Yeah, that's a great question. The Army really provided a real solid foundation for a lot of things. I think in particular, what comes to mind and would love to dive into is leadership being kind of first and foremost is kind of like a hallmark skill. Like it doesn't matter what rank position you hold, like everybody's a leader or is expected to be a leader in the Army. At least that's my experience. Second is problem solving. I think that being able to think critically and solve problems when a lot of different variables are changing, at a moment's notice is a super important skill, especially, in the business world. And I think, the Army did a great job, at least molding me into a leader that was able to kind of think on my feet, but maybe not necessarily have the full operating picture, but still be able to make a decision and execute and then ultimately accomplish a mission. So I think those are the core elements that really I took forward with me and kind of continue to hone and refine during my time at Deloitte.
Definitely. Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. Making decisions under pressure, keeping cool. Yeah, the leadership piece, especially as you're building your company, right?
Yeah, there's no sense in I think a lot of people would characterize my persona as a calm, easygoing kind of guy. I think I thrive in kind of high pressure environments. It just seems to be kind of what I excel at. I am not the kind of person that could sit in a cubicle and kind of do monotonous work for 8 hours a day. That's just not my cup of tea. But like fast-paced, dynamic environments, and I think everything that I've done thus far has really exhibited that.
Definitely. Yeah, I feel you there. Not destined for a desk job, despite how many hours I spend in front of it.
Yeah, but it's a different kind of desk work. I think like the mental challenges and just being able to solve problems day in, day out, I think really is what keeps me coming back to it.
For sure. Yeah, let's talk Carolina Expressways. So you're based in DC. How did you come up with that name?
Uh, the interesting, story how we came up with Carolina Expressway. So my wife and I lived in the same neighborhood in the Piedmont region of North Carolina. Our folks are still in Winston-Salem and Pinehurst, North Carolina, respectively. And while we were raised there for most of our lives, and my wife was born there, and we still have very strong roots, we wanted to bring that forward. Even though we were kind of transplants to the Northern Virginia area, while we hop back and forth between Virginia and North Carolina, so we felt it was okay to kind of continue to call upon that heritage. But yeah, Carolina Expressways is kind of our roots and where we came from. So we wanted to bring that forward regardless of where we were geographically located.
Got it. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It's got a ring to it too. Better than DC Expressways or something.
That wouldn't have been my first choice, but the real answer to the question was we were sitting on the beach in North Carolina and at the Outer Banks for an annual family vacation, and after several hours of going back and forth, that's what we landed on, and we just kept it. So
There you go. Yeah, that's awesome. I'm sure you service freight through the Carolinas.
we do. Actually, we broker quite a bit of freight moving, I would say across continental United States, but we more or less specialize in freight moving across the eastern seaboard, kind of originating from North Carolina, Virginia, Georgia, South Carolina. So it's a mid-Atlantic South, and then to the Midwest, all over the Midwest. So we have a pretty expansive territory for just several months on our belt, and with approximately 20 clients currently. So we are rapidly expanding and looking to expand westward.
Man, that's exciting. Awesome. Just several months, right? About how has that process been for you? Has there been anything harder than you might have expected?
Absolutely. The process of starting a business from, I think, ideation. I mean, like coming up with the idea for a business, I wouldn't say is easy, but I think once you decide on, hey, this is our business case, and more or less a hypothesis at that point until you start executing. But it took some time. Even I would say while I was still at Deloitte, we were having kind of informal conversations, and as time progressed, those matured and became a little more firm. And then once we decided to execute, it was kind of foot on the gas. But I think it's been a eye-opening experience. One, being a founder that has big business experience. It's a little bit different being a founder at a startup and with just a few employees instead of having large teams with unlimited resources. I think that was been the biggest challenge, and it's required us to be intentional about what we do, work smarter and not harder, and really just making intelligent decisions that are going to be both profitable for the business and provide us with some longevity. So, I mean, we are at the point now where we're in a phase where we want to start to aggressively scale. And I wouldn't say exponentially,
Sure.
but that is also is an intentional scaling kind of process. But
what does that look like over the next 10 years even?
I do. It's interesting you bring that up, because scaling for us is perhaps a little bit different, at least on the freight brokerage side. One, because with the advent of AI and kind of it's permeating, the freight and logistics industry kind of slowly but surely. I think you're largely going to see in the future very small brokerage teams that are supported by AI. They have the systems and the processes in place, and it's a force multiplier. And I think our goal is we want to scale both from a revenue standpoint, but maybe not necessarily a headcount standpoint. There's a number of use cases out there currently where there's folks that are have very large freight brokerage businesses. Either they're running them single-handedly or they have a core, set of employees. So I think success for us in scaling is how small can we stay without having to bring on more personnel, employee to help, support operations.
Yeah, no, I think you're 100% right on that. Keep it lean, right? And ride the wave of AI and technology.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're seeing a lot of that. I mean, even external to freight and logistics. I mean, you look at any of the big four consultancies and a lot of other industries, they are rapidly downsizing and they're being very candid saying, AI is not maybe not necessarily replacing the human being, but the expectation is that you can double output. So a single person and removing that overhead just, provides more profitability, which, I'm a capitalist at heart, so I understand that. But as a small business owner, I mean, I don't think we would be where we're at today and been able to achieve what we've been able to achieve thus far without some of those tools and solutions, in particular AI.
Yeah, for sure. How was it? We'll talk AI in a second, but how was it getting your first clients? I imagine did it help already kind of being, you know, familiar with government agencies and having that veteran status?
Yeah, so we on our government contracting side of the house, we're in the process of teaming with some existing large federal contractors in the DC area. We have a pretty robust pipeline, so we're aggressively pursuing a number of opportunities within the next 12 months, and so we expect to be successful there. But on getting our first client on the freight broker side, it's a slog. I mean, getting that first client means the world to me. It means the world to both my family because it means that like something is working and we're moving in the right direction. So it's like while it's one metric, you start to see that the process works and or you understand what you need to do differently. And I think we quickly understood what do we need to do differently to start acquiring more customers. And I think that just led into more differentiation within the market and trying to penetrate it as rapidly as we can. So I think we've been successful there.
Gotcha. Yeah, what does differentiation look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to kind of back up a minute to really look at the freight and logistics industry. I mean, there is, a fraud, organized crime epidemic where it has turned the market, I would industry players against one another. So brokers don't trust brokers, shippers don't trust brokers, carriers don't trust brokers, and vice versa. Nobody trusts anybody. And so being a newcomer on the street, the chips are stacked against you. Nobody wants to allow you to factor. Thankfully, we were able a great position to where we're partnered with a great factoring company that took us on, so we can start building business credit. It doesn't matter what my personal credit score is, it's can I pay those carriers? And a lot of carriers don't necessarily trust you until you've had, several months under your belt and have some business experience behind you, at least in the industry. So it's being able to manage a really capital intensive business up front. And I think we have been successful in overcoming some of those hurdles, but it wasn't easy.
Sure. Yeah, I imagine.
But I mean, I think but to my point of like the differentiation is we wanted to differentiate ourselves. Like while we call ourselves a tech enabled, brokerage, we're really a people first business. I mean, a lot of people, call, we like to call our shippers and carriers our clients. We're in the business of trying to establish long-term relationships that's mutually beneficial. And I think that is what I learned very early on as a kid whose parents had their own businesses, but specifically at Deloitte, where those relationships really make or break your business. They'll help you weather through the storms. And so we front load and we are very overt about pushing clients as the kind of driving force behind our business. We are not transactional and we will say so. And, I think that there's something to be said for because we're not transactional, there's really a shipper broker fit that really needs to happen. So we want to work with people that want to work with us,
Mm.
and share our values. And so I think a lot of people can get discouraged really quickly, coming into this market, perhaps not with a lot of experience in it. I think you just have to kind of keep your head down, put one foot in front of the other, and it gets better.
Yeah. 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 Well said. And it's interesting, yeah, freight brokering, the industry in general is very relationship driven. I've talked to a few people. I went to a TIA conference last year, and I was like, I was initially thinking, don't load boards potentially replace freight brokers? But as I got to know, the industry a little better, it's like, no, there's still got to be that human interaction at this stage, anyways.
There's a great book that was written about Alan Lund, who was essentially started off in the freight brokerage business back, many, many years ago, and he's since passed. But his family kind of is continuing the Lund brokerage business. But I would say a massive percentage of that book was focused on relationships with your carriers, taking care of your carriers, taking care of your clients or customers. It being something that was, and I read quite a lot, and getting that perspective from somebody who then went on to found, help found the TIA, which has been enormously helpful for myself and many other new brokers. But I would say relationships. I mean, you just know ifs, ands, or buts. It's all about those relationships, and they're gonna make or break you.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and serving your customers well. Yeah, how are you using technology? I saw you have a proprietary tech, right, called Network Forge. Can you
Yeah,
talk a little bit about that?
yeah. This is kind of the evolution of our business. And while we've been talking a lot about our freight brokerage business, we are kind of rapidly morphing into a logistics firm. Network Forge was kind of a concept of looking at, other solutions in the market, FreightWaves, Sonar being one of them, great platform, provides a lot of, information. Network Forge was an opportunity for us to differentiate and plug some of the gaps in terms of predictive intelligence, and then also being able to tailor a solution to some degree for a particular client, and be a kind of like a backbone for perhaps some of our advisory consulting and managed logistics services. So we are becoming, I would say, not even providing a SaaS solution, but we're starting to become more of a freight and logistics data, company. And that is, rapidly taking shape. We're offering that as a service right now, and we're iterating on, a few different permutations of that. And I think really over the next 12 months, we're getting good customer, feedback, client feedback, and we'll be continuing to refine and hone that. So we're looking forward to kind of rolling that out as perhaps more of a solution in the very near future.
Got it. Wow, that's awesome. Yeah, are you using like AI in that or in any other part of your business? I imagine it's yeah, there's especially with
Yeah,
that data, it makes sense to use AI, of course, right?
yeah, and I, of course, having some of that experience coming from the consulting world, um, I wasn't kind of like stepping to this blindly. I think with the with AI today and what I've been able to accomplish and folks on our team, I mean, we were able to put together, an MVP pretty quickly. I mean, rapidly prototype, setting up data lakes. There's a vast amount of data and information out there. So we have been able to make a lot of strides because of AI. We are at the point where we're building that kind of development team so that we can start to kind of ensure that we're in keeping with industry best practices. But the good thing is that it's deployable now, and we're ready to service clients as needed with that solution.
Yeah. Wow, that's exciting. So you kind of had an insider look into applying it a little
I,
bit.
I wouldn't say maybe an insider's view, but definitely not like I would characterize it as I definitely knew enough to be dangerous, like jack of all trades, kind of uh, positioning. But yeah, we're really looking forward to continue to mature that and roll it out more broadly.
Definitely. Yeah, and I always ask guests this too. Where do you see AI shaping your industry, freight and logistics over the next few years?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. If you've read anything in the freight and logistics news sphere, you don't have to go very far before you hit an article that's talking about AI. And I think a lot of the industry associations are definitely pushing broader expansion and adoption of some of those technologies. And I think, based on our prior conversation, and just to clue the audience in, is uh, being somewhat of an outsider looking in the freight and logistics industry, not to say that it's archaic, but there's been slow adoption, I think, with AI and other technologies that would normally be table stakes and others. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity. I think it's really AI is going to be one of those things where it's just like you either have it or you're not going to be competitive. And maybe that's okay for somebody else's business, but for ours, and I think I'm probably in like-minded and share this perspective is, AI is going to be able to allow us as a business to grow, expand, service our clients in the way that they expect, and perhaps in ways that they don't. And so it's over delivering for them. And the only way to do that, I think now, like I simply cannot achieve all that I am achieving on a daily basis without AI. Not that I totally rely upon it and like it thinks for me. The inputs are just as important as those outputs. And
Hmm.
I think AI, unless you have systems and processes in place, it can be kind of you don't know what you're going to get. And I think you can run into trouble there. But I think if you put all the right guardrails, and you're thinking about how you use it for your particular business, and every business is different, even freight brokerages, one is not like the other. So I think, it's huge. And I definitely think over the next, even several months, year, we're going to see a much broader adoption.
Yeah, definitely. I agree on every point you said. Definitely. The logistics industry is kind of notorious for being laggard in adopting new technology. AI is no exception
No,
to that.
no,
Um,
I think it's also an opportunity for us to really discover and gain efficiencies. Like, how do we optimize running a small business, but being able to generate a lot of impact? How do we drive more impact, and what's going to help us? And whether it's AI or not, I mean, we are eyes wide open and looking for that next tool that we can kind of put into our quiver, and help.
Definitely. Yeah, absolutely. And I love what you said too. It takes time to learn AI. You got to have the guardrails up. You can't just autopilot and, fire and forget.
I think like the new thing now is open claw, and so the discussion like
Yeah.
whether open claw is, how dangerous is it to deploy that on your computer. I think that there's a lot of great tools and solutions. I mean, AI is kind of ubiquitous, kind of it's a big tent. So like drilling down into like specifically what you're using it for and the use case, I think is really what matters at the end of the day. And I would wholeheartedly advocate for other small business owners, if you're not using it, uh, go learn. Don't necessarily jump right in, learn and learn by doing and putting your hands on it and getting a feel for it and see how it can help your business. Maybe it can, maybe it won't. So yeah, I think it's huge.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, start small. It takes time to learn how to use it. If you just use it as like a Google search engine, you're not going to get much value out of it. But if you teach it how to respond, in a way that you want, it's an
I would
iterative process. Yeah.
I would be so bold in the next, like if I'm looking in my crystal ball, I think it's not a like should you use it or should you not? And I know I kind of advocated for like maybe it's good for your business or not. I mean, those are ultimately decisions that a business owner and their team has to make. But for us, I mean, I see it as like if there's going to be an expectation just from an output standpoint that clients and customers are just going to require in the future. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is leveraging some of these AI capabilities.
Yeah. Well said. Definitely agree. Well, Ted, it's been an amazing conversation. I know we're coming up on time here. What's last question here. What's one practical takeaway you could give to business owners trying to tighten up their freight and logistics operations?
Yeah, this is a great question. I think any small business, it is, this isn't even technology focused, like throw technology to the wind for this, but manage expenses. Know where your money is going. When you start a business, there is you will be inundated with buying every widget out there. Take your time, evaluate, don't make, rushed decisions unless you have to, but manage your expenses, know where your money's going, and save it and put it in the treasury for a rainy day when you need to deploy it.
Smart. Well said. A great way to end it, Ted. Thank you so much for all the insight today. It's been an incredible conversation. Where can listeners find you easiest?
Yeah, so listeners can find, I'm very active on LinkedIn, Ted Fyock, TED FYOCK, and then www.carolinaexpressways.com. Come check us out. Love to have a conversation with you.
Awesome. I'll leave that in the show notes. Thanks, Ted.
All right, Pete. Thanks so much.
Exit algorithms. Scale smarter. Sell stronger.